What would you do if you saw a little girl, no more than 6, walk into a marble bank, clutching a torn doll and a letter from her late mother, only to be laughed at? Would you speak up or stay silent like everyone else? If you've ever witnessed something that tested your sense of right and wrong, share your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from, because your voice might be the one that still believes in dignity. The lobby of Sterling National Bank shimmered like a palace built for money. Light from the crystal chandeliers spilled across the marble floor, bouncing off polished shoes and the distant hum of whispered transactions. And then silence. A little girl had stepped through the revolving doors, clutching a frayed cloth doll and a wrinkled envelope. Grace Walker's small sneakers squeaked as she crossed the floor. Her chin barely reached the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I need to check an account." The teller, Andrew, tried not to laugh. "Sweetheart, do you even know what an account is?" Grace pushed the letter forward with both hands. "It's my mom's. She said if something happened, I should come here." From the far end of the lobby, Victor Harlan, the branch manager, glanced over. His tone was smooth but sharp. "We can't discuss private accounts with children." He waved his hand. "Escort her out, please." But Andrew hesitated. Something in the letter caught his eye. An account number, scribbled in shaky handwriting. He typed it in. The screen blinked once, then filled with numbers so large, he froze. Before he could speak, the heavy doors opened again. Every head turned. Ethan Cole, founder of Sterling Group, strode in wearing a gray overcoat and calm authority. The crowd straightened. Even Victor's confidence faltered. Ethan's voice carried through the hall. "What's happening here?" Victor stiffened. "A misunderstanding, sir. The child brought a random piece of paper." "She's a child," Ethan interrupted. His eyes softened as he looked at Grace. "And in my bank, children are treated with respect." Grace's lower lip trembled, but her gaze didn't drop. She whispered, "My mom said people here would remember being small." The room fell quiet. Ethan turned to Andrew. "Is the account real?" Andrew swallowed. "Yes, sir. It's real." A collective gasp moved through the lobby. Victor's smile collapsed. Ethan reached down, resting a reassuring hand on Grace's shoulder. "You're safe now." But as the cameras outside flashed through the glass doors, a ripple of unease crossed Ethan's face. Because safety, especially in a place built on power, never lasted long. And from the manager's office upstairs, a phone began to ring. Morning sunlight spilled across Manhattan, but inside Sterling Tower, the air still vibrated with last night's whispers. The story of the little girl in the marble bank had exploded overnight. A shaky cell phone clip, Grace's tiny voice saying, "I'm not leaving," had gone viral. Talk shows replayed it between commercials. Hashtags flooded every platform. Number stand with Grace. Number respect over wealth. Number dignity matters. At his penthouse window, Ethan Cole watched the chaos unfold on TV. His reflection looked older than the night before. On screen, anchors spoke his name with both awe and suspicion. "Billionaire defends orphan child," one headline said. "PR stunt or redemption arc," said another. Margaret Reed entered, tablet in hand, sharp as always. "You've created a media storm, Ethan," she said. "Half the country calls you a hero. The other half thinks you're trying to save your reputation." Ethan didn't turn from the window. "Maybe they're both right," he murmured. Meanwhile, Grace sat curled on the couch, her doll resting on her lap. She watched herself on TV, her small face trembling on every screen, and whispered, "Why are they talking about me like I'm not real?" Ethan knelt beside her. "Because stories travel faster than people. But we'll tell our own story now." Down at the bank, Victor Harlan rehearsed his own version of the truth. Under bright studio lights, he told a morning talk show, "We sympathize deeply with the child, But Mr. Cole's interference has jeopardized confidential procedures. This may all be misunderstood. His voice dripped with polite poison. By noon, news trucks swarmed outside Sterling Tower. Protesters held signs, "Grace speaks for all of us." Others shouted that Ethan was using her. Truth and rumor blurred into one roaring crowd. Margaret glanced at him nervously. "Victor's painting you as the manipulator. If we stay silent, he wins." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then we don't stay silent." That evening, he stepped onto the steps of Sterling Tower with Grace by his side. Cameras flashed like lightning. His voice carried above the noise. "Yesterday, this child came here with nothing but courage and was mocked for it. That was wrong. Not just for her, but for every child told they don't matter. Today, we begin again. We will build a foundation in her name to defend the dignity others forget." Cheers erupted. The crowd chanted her name. Grace's small hand tightened around his. For a moment, it felt like hope. But across town, in a dim office, Victor Harlan watched the broadcast with clenched fists. A second phone rang on his desk. He hesitated before answering. A calm, unfamiliar voice spoke on the other end. "If the girl stands, you fall. If she breaks, he burns." Victor's breath caught. "Who is this?" The line crackled once, then went dead. The next morning dawned cold and gray, the kind of Manhattan morning that felt like a warning. Sterling Tower loomed above the city like a monument under siege. Reporters camped outside, their breath forming clouds in the November air. Inside, Ethan Cole sat in his office, sleeves rolled up, staring at the flood of headlines covering his desk. New allegations in Sterling Bank scandal. Was Grace Walker used as a prop? Anonymous source claims account may be fraudulent. Ethan's jaw tightened. The same people who had praised him yesterday now questioned his motives. Public love was fickle, and Victor Harlan knew how to twist it. Margaret entered quietly. "They're turning her into a weapon, Ethan. The press, the board, the investors. Everyone wants a piece of the girl's story." Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "They don't want her story," he said. "They want control of it." Down the hall, Grace sat in the lounge with her doll, sketching in a notebook. The drawing showed a tall man standing beside a small girl beneath a tower of glass. Across the top, she'd written, "Don't give up." She looked up as Ethan entered, trying to hide the worry in her small smile. "They keep saying Mom's account wasn't real," she whispered. "But she wouldn't lie to me." Ethan crouched beside her. "Your mother didn't lie. The truth is just buried under people who don't want it found." Before he could say more, Margaret burst in, her expression tense. "Victor's at the board meeting. He's demanding a full investigation. He's saying the funds in Grace's account came from illegal transfers." Ethan stood, his voice low but sharp. "That account is legitimate. If he wants an investigation, we'll give him one publicly." That afternoon, under the eyes of cameras, Ethan announced a full audit of Sterling Bank's records. His words rang like steel. "Transparency is not a weakness. It's the only weapon against deceit." Applause followed, but so did murmurs of doubt. As the press dispersed, Margaret approached him with a folder. "You should see this," she said quietly. The original account wasn't opened by Grace's mother alone. It was co-signed by someone inside Sterling. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Who?" Margaret hesitated. "Victor Harlan." Ethan's eyes darkened. "Then the storm we're in. He built it himself." But before Margaret could reply, the lights flickered, once then went out. And from the security desk below came a single radio call. "Sir, we've lost the East Wing cameras." The power outage lasted less than a minute. But in the silence that followed, the air inside Sterling Tower changed. It was no longer just a bank's headquarters. It felt like the heart of a brewing war. Ethan Cole stood by the window, the city lights blinking back on far below. "It's not random," he said quietly. Someone's probing our systems. Margaret Reed handed him a tablet. It says the breach came from inside the network. They're calling it a test run. Ethan's gaze hardened. A test for what? Downstairs, Grace sat in the cafeteria with 2 security guards nearby. She swung her legs nervously, her doll resting in her lap. When the lights had gone out, she'd whispered to herself the words her mother used to say. Stay small. Stay strong. But this time, they didn't make her feel safe. Meanwhile, in an office across the city, Victor Harlan poured himself a drink. The flicker of the television lit his strained face as he watched Ethan's latest press conference replay. Transparency, he muttered bitterly. He's playing saint while I take the fall. A phone buzzed. He hesitated before answering. The same calm voice returned. You're not listening, Victor. This isn't about him or you. It's about the girl. Victor swallowed. You can't touch her. The voice chuckled darkly. She's already in our sights. Do you really think power protects anyone? Victor's knuckles whitened around the glass. He didn't reply. Back at Sterling Tower, Ethan's private line rang. Detective Harris, an old friend from the NYPD, spoke without preamble. We intercepted chatter. Someone's planning to make a move on the kid maybe tonight. Ethan straightened. Calm, but cold. Then they'll walk into a wall. Lock down every entrance. Nobody gets in or out without clearance. By midnight, the building was sealed. The hallways gleamed under emergency lights. Security cameras hummed softly, their lenses sweeping across the marble corridors. Grace had fallen asleep on the couch in Ethan's penthouse office, her doll tucked under her chin. Ethan stood nearby, watching her breathe. His thoughts heavy. He had built empires, fought markets, won wars of money, but he had never felt this kind of fear. At 12:47 a.m., the alarm chimed once, then died. Silence. Margaret froze. What was that? Harris checked his radio. We just lost signal from the top floor. A sharp crack split the air. The elevator doors on the far end of the hall slid open, and 3 men stepped out. They moved with military precision, black gloves and steady eyes. The first one spoke into an earpiece. Target confirmed. Proceed. Ethan's heart pounded once, hard, before instinct took over. Get her behind the desk, he barked. Harris drew his weapon. The first shot echoed through the tower like thunder. Glass shattered, alarms screamed, and chaos erupted. Margaret dove for cover, dragging Grace with her. Ethan charged forward, grabbing the nearest metal chair and hurling it across the room, shattering the attacker's line of sight. The little girl's screams sliced through the noise, pure, terrified, human. One of the intruders lunged toward the couch, but Harris intercepted him, the 2 crashing hard to the floor. The others pulled back, retreating toward the elevator as red lights flared. Then, in the strobe of emergency sirens, a 4th man appeared in the doorway. Calm. Composed. The suited man. His voice was smooth as silk, and twice as cold. Mr. Cole, he said, stepping into the light. You can protect her tonight, but not forever. Ethan raised the fallen guard's weapon, his voice like ice. Watch me, the man smiled faintly. Consider this your warning. He turned, disappearing into the elevator as the doors slid shut. When the last echo of footsteps faded, Ethan lowered the gun, breathing hard. Margaret clutched Grace, whispering over and over, It's okay. It's over. But Ethan knew better. He looked down at the trembling child, and then at the broken glass around them. No, he said softly. It's just beginning. Morning broke with the sound of helicopters circling above Sterling Tower. The skyline shimmered under a pale sun. But inside the building, the atmosphere was heavy and sleepless. The marble lobby had been transformed overnight into a crime scene yellow tape, police radios, and flashes from crime scene cameras where only yesterday there had been applause. Ethan Cole stood beside Detective Harris as they watched officers sweep the upper floors. They were trained, Harris said grimly. Not random thugs. Whoever sent them had resources military, maybe private. Ethan's voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. And they didn't come to rob us. They came to take her. From across the hall, Grace peeked from behind Margaret's coat. Her doll was clutched tight, its fabric torn at one arm. Are they gone? She asked softly. Ethan knelt to meet her eyes. For now, he said gently. But we're going somewhere safe today. Margaret gave him a sharp look. Where is safe anymore, Ethan? If they breached Sterling Tower, they can breach anywhere. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the skyline. Then we stop hiding. If they want the truth buried, we dig it up in front of the whole world. That afternoon they relocated to his private estate in upstate New York. A modern glass house, surrounded by quiet woods. Reporters followed them, halfway before the gates shut. For the first time in days, Grace had space to breathe. She wandered through the garden, small shoes crunching on gravel, her reflection flickering in the pond like a ghost of peace that never stayed long. Inside, Ethan met with Harris and Margaret in the study. The detective spread a series of photos across the desk's security stills from the break-in. One image froze Ethan's blood. A partial shot of the suited man's face. Clean, cut, mid-40 seconds, calm even under gunfire. Facial recognition hit? Ethan asked. Harris nodded grimly. Name's Daniel Krell, ex-private intelligence contractor. Disappeared off the grid 2 years ago. He's worked for political donors, corporate blackmailers, and anyone who pays enough. Margaret's face paled. And now he's after a 6-year-old. Ethan rubbed his temples. He's after control. Grace isn't just a child to them. She's proof of something they don't want seen. Margaret hesitated. There's more. We rechecked the transaction history of the account. Those deposits, large ones, they trace back to shell companies tied to Sterling Bank's executive fund. Ethan froze. You're saying the money was internal? Yes, she said quietly. And Victor Harlan was the signatory. The room fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Ethan exhaled slowly. So Victor wasn't just covering for someone. He was part of it. Harris nodded. Looks that way. But now he's in hiding. We've got units tracking his properties. But nothing yet. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. Grace sat on the porch steps, her doll balanced on her knees. She hummed softly to herself the same tune her mother used to sing. But even as she hummed, she noticed something strange. A black car parked at the far end of the private road. It hadn't moved in an hour. She stood, peering closer through the glass. A flicker of movement inside the car, a camera lens glinting under the sunlight. Grace ran back inside, breathless. Mr. Cole! There's someone watching. Ethan's blood turned cold. He strode to the window. The car engine started, gravel spitting as it sped away. Harris barked orders into his radio. License plates get me every unit within 10 miles. Ethan turned to Grace, placing both hands on her shoulders. Listen to me. You did the right thing, but from now on, you don't step outside without me. Ever. She nodded, eyes wide. Are they coming back? He hesitated. Yes, he said finally. But next time, we'll be ready. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study, the room dimly lit by the glow of city lights beyond the forest. He opened the folder Margaret had left behind: documents, signatures, encrypted files, and one photo clipped to the back. It was a picture of Grace's mother, Elaine Walker, standing outside Sterling Bank nearly 7 years earlier. Smiling, holding an envelope the same one Grace had brought, and beside her, almost hidden in the photo, stood Victor Harlan, shaking her hand. Ethan leaned back, realization hitting like ice. The account wasn't an accident. It was a message one Victor had helped create before betraying it. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number appeared on the screen. "You can't save her twice, Mr. Cole. The truth dies tomorrow." Ethan stared at the words until they blurred. Then he whispered to the empty room, "We'll see about that." Outside, unseen from the house, the same black car had returned engine off, headlights dark waiting. Rain rolled in before dawn, steady and relentless, turning the estate's long driveway into a ribbon of silver. The house, once a sanctuary, felt like a cage surrounded by shadows. Ethan Cole hadn't slept. He sat in the study, the glow of his laptop painting deep lines across his face as he scrolled through encrypted files. Margaret had recovered overnight. Every document pointed to one truth. Grace's mother, Elaine Walker, had been a whistleblower. Years earlier, she discovered illegal internal transfers at Sterling Bank, money funneled from investor accounts into secret funds. The Grace account wasn't a gift. It was evidence, hidden in plain sight. Margaret entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell," she said softly. Ethan managed a weary smile. "I feel worse." Elaine wasn't just protecting her daughter. She was trying to expose them. Margaret sat opposite him. "Victor must have realized it after she died. He's been covering it up ever since. But now that Grace holds the key, she's the loose end they can't control," Ethan finished. Thunder cracked outside. Grace appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes, her doll tucked under her arm. "You're talking about my mom again, aren't you?" Ethan's tone softened. "We are, sweetheart. She was brave. She tried to make things right." Grace stepped closer. "Then why are bad people still winning?" Ethan crouched down, looking her in the eyes. "Because the truth takes time to catch up to lies. But it always does." A knock shattered the quiet. 3 sharp raps against the front door. Harris, stationed in the hall, drew his gun and signaled for silence. He peered through the glass, no movement. Just the rain. He opened the door an inch. A small envelope lay on the porch, sealed with a wax insignia of a black S. Margaret picked it up carefully. Inside was a single card. On it, printed in red letters, "Midnight. City Hall. Bring the girl if you want the truth." Harris cursed under his breath. "It's a trap." Ethan turned the card over. Scrawled by hand at the bottom were 3 words. "She deserves answers." He looked at Grace. "It's her mother's handwriting." Margaret's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Elaine's been dead for years." Ethan's voice was steady, but his pulse raced. "Unless she left this message before she died, and they've been holding it until now." Grace clutched his sleeve. "Does that mean she's still alive?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. But in his chest, something flickered a hope, too dangerous to believe in, yet impossible to ignore. Harris broke the silence. "We can't go charging into a setup. We plan it right back up. Exit routes. Eyes everywhere." Ethan nodded slowly, his expression turning to steel. "Midnight at City Hall, then. If they want a meeting, they'll get one." Outside, lightning split the sky in 2. And deep in the woods beyond the estate gates, headlights flared to life, 2 vehicles idling in the rain. Watching. Waiting. As Ethan turned away from the window, the storm swallowed the last of the daylight, and somewhere in the distance, a clock struck 12 hours to midnight. The storm didn't let up. By midnight, Manhattan was soaked in sheets of rain that blurred every streetlight into a halo. City Hall stood like a ghost in the downpour, silent, looming, the kind of place where truth and danger could shake hands. Ethan Cole's car rolled to a stop at the base of the marble steps. Inside, tension clung to the air like static. Detective Harris sat up front, eyes scanning the shadows. Margaret was in the back with Grace, adjusting the hood of her small raincoat. Grace's doll rested in her lap, one arm missing, the fabric darkened by water. "Are you sure about this?" Margaret whispered. "They picked the time and the place. They hold every card." Ethan's eyes stayed on the entrance ahead. "Then we flipped the deck." He stepped out first, his long coat whipping in the wind. Harris followed, hand close to his weapon. Grace took Ethan's hand as they climbed the steps, her grip firm despite the cold. She didn't ask if this was safe anymore. She already knew the answer. Inside the grand hall, the lights flickered weakly. Shadows danced along the walls. The echoes of their footsteps were swallowed by the rain outside. Then a voice emerged from the darkness. Smooth, familiar. "Right on time, Mr. Cole." Ethan turned. The suited man stepped into the pale light, umbrella dripping rainwater onto the marble floor. His eyes gleamed with amusement. "You brought the girl. I must admit, I wasn't sure you would." Harris raised his weapon, but Ethan held up a hand. "You wanted her here. You said you had answers." The man smiled faintly. "Oh, I do. But answers have prices." From the shadows behind him, two more figures appeared, armed, silent. One carried a black briefcase. The man placed it on the nearest bench and opened it slowly. Inside were documents, photographs, and a familiar envelope creased, water-stained. Grace's breath caught. "That's my mom's letter." The suited man tilted his head. "Your mother was a remarkable woman. Brave. Foolish. But brave. She found something she shouldn't have, proof of Sterling Bank's offshore laundering. She was going to go public. But Victor Harlan stopped her. Permanently." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're lying." The man shrugged. "Am I?" "Ask Victor. He's the one who called us for help that night." Margaret's voice trembled. "Victor hired you?" The man's smile widened. "At first. Then he became a liability. You see, Mr. Cole, your company wasn't just a bank. It was a front for something much larger." And Elaine Walker stumbled right into it. Grace stared at the documents inside the briefcase. Her small fingers reached out, trembling. "So, she died because she told the truth?" The man's tone softened mockingly. "The truth is expensive, sweetheart. And not everyone can afford it." "Lake. Because." Ethan's rage flared, his voice cutting through the room. "You killed her." The man didn't deny it. "We removed a problem. But her legacy lives in that child's account. And you, Mr. Cole, have turned it into a revolution. That makes you a problem too." He snapped his fingers. The armed men raised their weapons. Harris fired first. The hall erupted in chaos, gunfire echoing like thunder. Ethan shoved Grace behind the stone pillar as bullets sparked against marble. Margaret ducked, dragging a fallen chair for cover. "Move!" Harris shouted, returning fire. One of the attackers went down, the other retreating toward the staircase. The suited man stood calmly amidst the chaos, his umbrella still in hand, smiling through the storm. Ethan lunged forward, tackling him to the ground. The umbrella clattered away. They grappled, fists colliding, breath ragged. Ethan's fury was raw, animal. "You won't touch her again," he roared. The man twisted free, reaching for the fallen briefcase. "You can't stop what's already in motion," he hissed. "The files are everywhere." Ethan slammed him back against the marble column, but the suited man laughed, even as blood trickled from his lip. "You think this is about money or justice? It's about control, and control doesn't die with me." Harris charged forward, gun trained. "Don't move." The man reached into his jacket too fast. A single shot echoed. He staggered, eyes wide, then fell to the ground. Silence. Only the rain outside dared to speak. Grace ran from behind the pillar, tears mixing with rain. "Is he gone?" Ethan knelt beside the man's body, checking for a pulse. Nothing. He looked up at Harris. "You didn't have a choice." Harris nodded grimly, lowering the gun. But this doesn't end here. Margaret opened the briefcase with shaking hands. Inside the documents was a small flash drive wrapped in plastic, labeled with a single word. Proof. Ethan met her eyes. Get it to the press. Every outlet. Every network. No filters. She hesitated. Ethan, once this goes out, you'll burn your entire empire. Then let it burn, he said. If it means she gets justice. As dawn crept over the horizon, sirens wailed in the distance, police, reporters, a city awakening to the story about to break. Grace stood beside Ethan on the steps of City Hall, her small hand gripping his. The rain had stopped. She looked up, her voice soft. Did we win? Ethan gazed at the rising light. Not yet, he said. But we finally have the truth. Behind them, unnoticed in the chaos, a security camera blinked red, recording everything. And somewhere deep within the system, a new message began to upload to an unknown address. Phase 2 initiated. By sunrise, the storm had passed, but the city hadn't found peace. The footage from City Hall gunfire, shouting, the billionaire shielding a little girl, flooded every screen in America. News anchors called it the Grace Walker revelation. Talk radio called it the day truth walked into a bank. Ethan Cole's world, however, had shrunk to a hospital room. Grace sat beside the bed, her small hand wrapped around his, the soft beeping of monitors breaking the silence. The bullet that grazed his shoulder had been removed, but exhaustion lingered deeper than the wound. Margaret stood near the window, phone buzzing nonstop. It's everywhere, she said. The drive you gave me, it's out. Every transaction, every shell company, every dirty deal. Sterling Bank's stock dropped 50% overnight. The Justice Department's moving in. Mice. Ethan managed a faint smile. Then Elaine Walker finally got her justice. Margaret nodded. And you just dismantled your own empire to do it. He glanced at Grace, whose tired eyes were fixed on the sunlight spilling through the blinds. Some things are worth more than empires. The door opened quietly. Detective Harris stepped in, his coat damp, expression grave. It's over, he said. Victor Harlan's in custody. He tried to run but didn't make it 2 blocks. And the suited man's organization, what's left of it, is unraveling. Grace looked up. So, we're safe now? Harris knelt beside her. Safer than yesterday, kiddo. She smiled faintly, clutching her doll to her chest. Mom would like that. Hours later, the 3 of them stood on the steps of the courthouse. Cameras surrounded them again. But this time, the noise was different applause, not anger. Grace wore a small blue coat and the same scarf her mother had left her. Ethan stood beside her, his arm bandaged, his presence steady as ever. He faced the reporters and spoke softly, his voice carrying through the crisp morning air. This is not about a bank. It's about dignity, something this little girl reminded all of us we'd forgotten. Elaine Walker believed that truth could still matter. Her daughter proved she was right. The crowd cheered. Grace waved shyly, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled without fear. Later, back at the estate, Ethan watched her playing in the garden. She laughed as the wind lifted her scarf and the doll's tattered dress. For the first time, the sound wasn't haunted. It was free. Margaret joined him on the porch. You know, the world's calling you a hero. Ethan shook his head. No, she's the hero. I just listened. Grace turned toward him then, her eyes bright. Look, Mr. Cole, I'm not scared anymore. He felt something tighten in his chest, then ease. He smiled. Neither am I. The sun climbed higher, warming the wet grass, erasing the traces of the storm. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, carrying across the hills a quiet requiem for the mother who had started it all, and a promise for the child who would carry her light forward. The world had tried to bury the truth. Instead, it had planted a seed. The story of Grace Walker and Ethan Cole reminds us that dignity, once awakened, can move mountains no law or fortune ever could. It shows that real wealth has nothing to do with numbers in an account, but with the courage to stand up when everyone else looks away. In a world obsessed with status and image, Grace's innocence forces us to remember what humanity truly costs: empathy, responsibility, and truth. Ethan, a man who once measured success by profit, discovers that integrity is the only currency that never loses value. Through their bond, the story reflects the moral heartbeat of America, the belief that every person, no matter how small or powerless, deserves respect. It urges us to confront our own silence in the face of injustice and to act with compassion, even when it risks everything. Beyond the suspense and conflict, this story carries a timeless message: that kindness can rebuild trust, truth can heal corruption, and love can turn even the coldest empire into a place of warmth and hope. It's a mirror held to our society, asking, quietly, but powerfully, what kind of world we choose to build for those who come after us.